I'm entering my second year there. One of my wonderful athletes is in the back corner. So you can look at her for verification as I'm talking. And I am going, if trials go as well as I hope they do, I will be going into my 10th year on the Canadian national team and hoping to continue that journey through 2020 after qualifying this coming summer, hopefully, when anything happens. So that's the goal. The mental game is extremely important in our sport. I think in any sport, but more so in baseball, softball, there's a ton of failure in our game, and the mental game is just that much more important to allow athletes to bounce back and to perform at their best day in and day out, to perform as well as possible when you're not feeling your best, to be able to teach our athletes to be able to control their mindset and just perform as well as possible. So just like our bodies and our muscles, our brain needs exercising too. I don't expect that I talk to my athletes one day and the next day they're going to be able to, have positive self-talk and be confident and everything like that. It takes a lot of hard work, and so it's extremely important to exercise and challenge the brain in those ways. And there are opportunities every single day to do that in practice. And it doesn't even take extra time outside of practice, although we do schedule time outside of practice to meet with our mental performance coach. Many schools have invested in mental performance coaches recently, and I anticipate that number to continue to grow. Mental health in colleges is a hot topic, and in college athletics especially. So we are fortunate enough with the Canadian national team, we have a full-time mental performance coach that travels with us all summer, and she's available over the phone for us during the year, so we can have sessions with her as often as we like. And then during the season, we can pop into her room at any point and just touch base with her, have scheduled meetings, or touch base after a tough game, or anything in between. So I mentioned failure already. I think it is huge in our game to encourage failure. Failure happens during our games every single day, and so if we don't encourage that in practice, then it's almost as though it's a bad thing, a really bad thing, really disruptive thing when it occurs. So we encourage failure, we challenge our athletes in practice, and that's how we improve. We learn what our range is in the field by knowing when we have to dive for a ball, when we might be able to get it on our feet, when we might just miss it, and unless we get to our limits and fail in those things, we won't understand where our limits are. Base running decisions. In practice, we tell our players to be extremely aggressive on the bases. We want them to understand when they can push, when they can be more aggressive, when they can take an extra base versus when they're going to likely be thrown out. And we want to teach those instincts through failure. We encourage it, we celebrate it, and I think a lot of coaches put pressure on their athletes to perform perfectly, and I think it is extremely important, and we abide by this in our program to encourage the failure, and we plan our practices in ways that are going to challenge our players. We'll put pitchers in a 3-0 count, and vice versa, put our hitters in an 0-2 count, and everything in between that to push them to have to make an adjustment immediately. We try to make the game move faster than it actually will, so we'll time our infielders to make plays within 2.5 seconds, and there aren't very many athletes out there who can get to first in 2.5 seconds, but we want them to rise to that challenge and they fail at that a lot. Like, sorry, that was 2.7, didn't get it that time, and that frustrates them when that happens repeatedly, but it allows them to feel as though they have a million minutes in a game to field that ground ball and make that play. The confidence piece is huge, I think, especially in female athletes. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of athletes in general, female athletes specifically, and so that's one reason why we encourage failure and celebrate failure, because we want to continue building that confidence. So good failure in my mind is full effort. So I was talking about, when you dive and just miss a ball, so that's a great failure. Finding your limits in every way, finding your limits in the strike zone, improving mechanics. So if we're adding, next step, maybe we have an athlete who hasn't worked a ton on throwing from different arm slots, throwing from different angles, and we're going to encourage them to try that and to get that into their repertoire. And at first they're going to fail a lot. They're going to throw the ball away a lot. And without fail, every time I ask someone to do something like that and they throw the ball away, they immediately look at me to see my reaction. I'm like, great, now just adjust your release point. And so I think a lot of athletes, have that failure and immediately panic. And so we try to make that a thing that, we're happy about. Great, you failed on that one, so we're gonna find an adjustment to make, and we're gonna continue to improve that skill. In the weight room, I see this all the time, where players they'll do a lift, say we're testing a lift, 1 rep max, and they'll complete a rep and feel good about it. It was higher than their max before, and they'll walk away from it. So yes, they've improved, but we want to push them to try 5 pounds more. And so what if you don't get it? Then you know that you actually hit your limit. We had actually a player at the beginning of this fall who we were doing max chin-ups. She did, I forget how many, and just walked away after her last completed rep, and it looked like she had more in the tank, to me. Now that's my observation, my judgment, so I had a conversation with her after about, why not try that next rep? Why not? Either you're not going to get it and you're going to stay at the number you're at, or you're going to get it and you're going to have one more chin-up. So we encourage our athletes to use those skills in the weight room and allow themselves to push themselves and each other to the point where they can't get up from that squat because they have reached their max. And at the bottom I said I'm doing my team a disservice if they're not pushing their limits on a daily basis in practice, because one thing we talk about a lot is getting 1% better, and we want to get 1% better every single day, and the only way we're going to do that is if we're pushing our limits and getting better at that. Have most of you heard of Sue Inquest? She was the winningest coach upon her retirement from UCLA. She won 11 national championships, 10 as a coach, 1 as a player. Now she is running One Softball. Look that up online, great company. And one thing that stuck out to me when I heard her speak was champions win in Plan B. And it is so true that most things don't go as planned. We often have our ideal practice plan, we have our ideal lineup, we have our ideal season, and things always come up. Players, knock on wood, get injured, and one drill will go over in practice. So you always have to be able to make adjustments, and so that's something that has always stuck with me, is that champions win in Plan B, and we want our athletes to be able to embody that mindset and be able to make adjustments on the fly. So one other thing that we do is when we're not working on something new, we don't allow our athletes to take an extra rep. Is that frustrating, Lick?
Yes.
Yes, it can be very frustrating. But in a game, I can never go up to the pitcher and say, hey, you just struck me out, but do you mind throwing me one more strike? So we try to mirror that no do-over mentality in practices when we're not working on something new. So like I said earlier, when we're working on something new, there's lots of failure. We want to be able to work through reps, work through those mistakes and get better through that. But if we're working on something, if we're just getting reps in the cage, we'll say, okay, today we're going to get 6 swings in the cage. And a looking strike will count as a swing, and you don't get any more than that. Okay, so they go in there, they get their 6 swings, and the 6th one could be a pop-up into the top of the cage, and too bad, session's over, out you come. And we do that in order to mirror the game mentality and to have to, oftentimes you're going to get another chance in there, so you have time to kind of reflect on that session and then come back in and have your 6 more reps. Sometimes you don't, but it really allows the athletes to work on that game mindset and be able to sit on that failure and then come back hungry to do better the next time. I'll often ask them when they exit the cage, which one did you end on? And that does not mean the one that they actually just swung at. It is in their mind, what was your best swing that round? So that becomes the rep that they ended on in their mind. So they're learning to walk away from maybe an at-bat where they crushed a line drive, just fouled, and then they struck out looking like a goofball on a changeup. But it allows them to have the skill to think back to that line drive they crushed, just fouled, and think of that as their last rep. Or maybe someone's in a 5 at-bat strikeout streak, and we are trying to get them to a place where they can think back to 6 at-bats ago and imagine that was their most recent at-bat and build off of that confidence. Routines we talk about a lot, and we actually have our pitchers write down their routines to every detail. I receive the ball from the catcher, I turn to my left, I walk to the back of the circle, I take a deep breath, I step onto the rubber, I look to my coach for the sign, every detail of their routine, because in our game, routines are so important. With the amount that we fail in our game, again, we want to be able to stick to our routine, stick to our comfort zone, and be able to stay in that rhythm no matter what has happened, the pitch before, the swing before, the play before, etc. So most teams have pregame routines. In the game of softball, depending on how long you get to the field, how long into the game you get to the field, it might have to be longer or shorter one day. So it does have to be flexible, but there are, typically teams have set things that they want to get done before every single game. And offensively, we have our hitters write down to every detail their routine at the plate. And I'll share with you my personal routine for the offensive side. So my routine starts 4 batters out, and I grab my helmet and batting gloves and get those on and power pose. So 4 batters out, I'm standing in the dugout, just gaining as much confidence as I can. There's been a ton of research that shows that simply just standing or sitting in a powerful way will change how you feel versus if you're small, slouched over, has the opposite effect. So 4 batters out, start with my power pose, and 3 batters out, I find some space and work on my timing. So if there's enough space to get my swing off, then I'll do that. If not, then I just work on the timing of getting that front foot down and engaging my lower half to the pitcher. And the reason I do that when I'm 3 batters out versus on deck is because a lot of times we are actually giving cues to our batters or picking up things from the fielders, etc. when we're as close as possible in the on-deck circle, trying to pick things from the catchers. And so I want to make sure that I have my timing prior to being in that position. So in the on-deck circle, a lot of time, my focus is on the play that's happening, being able to help my base runner on second base, so that they know I'll be there at the plate, telling them when and where to slide if they need to, and helping out the batter and just reading as much as I can in the game. And then taking a couple swings as well to just keep that timing ingrained in me. Then walking up to the plate, I'm assessing the defense, assessing my mental state, and I'm in Overthinkers Anonymous. So I think a lot of females, especially at our type of institution, overthink a lot. And that's another reason why routines are extremely important. So at this point, I am assessing, what's my brain doing? Am I in a good place? Am I going a mile a minute? Am I thinking negatively? What's happening up top? And, just getting myself in a good space at that time. Take a sign from our coach, which is so strange. Our head coach is actually at first base, and so as a lefty, I now know what righties have to deal with all the time, turning around to get that sign, and then taking one last look at the defense and saying something encouraging to myself about annihilating the pitcher or just crushing hitting the ball hard, making sure that I'm distracting my brain in a positive way as I'm stepping into the batter's box, and typically dig my back foot in, point that bat out there, and then get into my stance ready to go. And the last piece is reminding myself to focus on the release point. And as simple as that is, it's something that often can get lost. And even working with players in the cages, someone will mishit, and you'll say something as simple as just pick the ball up here and then line drive. So that's my last cue to myself as the pitcher is winding up. So routines have to be personal, whatever works for a certain player, but we talk about routines a lot and tweaking them and making sure that it's something that is going to enhance the performance of the athlete. Defensive routines can be, very, very different position by position. For myself, I just have 3 words I say to myself: assess, plan, attack. Reminds me to assess the situation, plan my attack, and then attack the ball. And I think most defenders would say when they kind of allow the ball to play them, sit back on their heels, they make the most mistakes. And so that's why my final word is attack, because I always want to make sure I'm being aggressive and attacking that ball. We're going to make mistakes, guaranteed, sometime throughout the game, whether it's offensively, defensively, and being able to bounce back is extremely important. And so having a routine to be able to bounce back is important as well. And that's the most recent addition that I've had to my own personal game. And my example for that would be that I look to the highest point on the field, so whether it's the flag or the scoreboard, and that goes back to what I was talking about earlier about body language and how much that affects us. So in my bounce back routine, I wanted to make sure that I was standing tall, head high, as opposed to having something like wiping the dirt, because then I'm getting smaller looking down. So I want to make sure that I'm tall and I'm staring at that highest point that I can find in the stadium, and telling myself that I am a effing great player. So that's what I'm saying to myself after I make a mistake. Post game, this picture here is after a loss, but we do the exact same thing after losses, after wins. We all go to the pitcher's mound after we've gone through the line, shaking hands, and cheer Canada and thank the fans for coming out and supporting. And I imagine if it was a win or a loss, we would look fairly similar, and we want to be able to walk away from every single game in a similar state. Obviously, you're going to be way more excited when you just won a game, but we want to have the same kind of body language, be proud that we're representing Canada, be proud and honored that people were there to watch us, and so we keep a consistent routine after our games. So self-talk and routines in practice. We haven't done this a ton at Bucknell yet, but a lot of my previous institutions, I would have an on-deck station in our hitting rotation. And so that just allows players to work their on-deck routines, work their positive self-talk. I have a different focus in that station every day. So some days it might be, okay, it's a positive self-talk station, and all I want you to do for the 5 minutes that you're at that station is talk to yourself in your head. Okay, and I can't tell if you're doing it, I can't hear what you're saying, but that's the focus here, and it just provides an opportunity that's similar to a game where they're waiting to go into the cage, waiting for their at-bat, to practice being positive with themselves. So sometimes we'll do slow-paced front tops, allowing the players to work their between pitch routine. So instead of them just standing in there getting pitch after pitch after pitch, we will slow it down so they have time to take their swing, step out, and do whatever it is that their routine is. Some of them, they take 3 swings, and then they stare at their bat and they take a breath, and then they step back into the box. So we'll actually work that into practice so they can practice that game-like feeling. Game situations and scrimmages, I love live. So we'll go live really, really early when we come back in January. And I just think there's nothing like live situations. It just allows you to continue working through, maybe you feel like you've covered everything in practices so far, and then you go into a live situation, you're like, wow, we forgot to do first and thirds. We have no idea what we're doing. we forgot to cover leads, and so it just allows you to have that visual and check in with your team on where things are, and then also allows them to work their routines into game situations and practices. And then conditioning. So this quote here, I found that actually today, and I literally have to do that every time I get on the treadmill because I hate running. And I'm certain that most softball players hate running. We run 60 feet and we turn left, and that is it. And so when I step on that treadmill and I open up my app from Team Canada, look up my prescribed workout for the day, I hate the treadmill, I don't want to, and then I immediately think something along those lines where, okay, come on, you're gonna get through this, it's gonna make you a better athlete, it's gonna keep you in good shape, so let's go get this done, and just have to have that switch. And to this day, it still happens. It doesn't go away, but having had a lot of work on the mental side of the game and on positive self-talk, it has allowed me to be able to switch that mindset and be able to have a productive session as opposed to being stuck on the fact that I don't like running. And speaking of conditioning, my team will never run for punishment, and I am talking about conditioning tomorrow, so feel free to pop in at 2 o'clock tomorrow to hear about that. So another way to work mental game into practice is just 5 minutes at the beginning of practice. So we come together, we call it our herd at the beginning of practice, and most of the time it's kind of a check-in time. A couple people will share a story from their day, or we'll go around and everyone will say one word about someone that we've thrown in the middle of the circle. And this is some stuff that we're going to be working into that time more this season, so I'm excited about that. So mindful breathing, you can literally take 5, even 3 minutes at the beginning of practice and just say, okay, everybody, we're just gonna sit down, get in a comfortable position, or lie down, feet up on the fence, get in a comfortable position. We're just gonna focus on our breathing for 3 minutes. And at first, they'll probably smirk a little bit and think it's a little weird, and that's something that our mental performance coach has been working with a lot of us on throughout the last 2 years. And our coaching staff actually does mindfulness every single morning throughout the summer. They get up and that's the first thing they do. They get together and they do 10 minutes of mindfulness, and they felt a huge change. I felt a huge change in my own performance this summer after focusing on mindful breathing. I started off just a minute a day, and it's amazing just what that can do for your mind and your ability to be in the moment, be present. And so something easy to throw at the beginning of practice, and be mindful of thoughts, so that's something that can get added into the mindful breathing, is just to, okay, now be mindful of what you were thinking while you're doing that, as opposed to just trying to focus on your breathing. Your mind is gonna wander, so then just be cognizant of where your mind is wandering to before you're bringing yourself back to your breathing. Tension release and posture. So our mental performance consultant on campus this year worked with the team in our initial session with her this year on just being aware of where the tension is in your body. A lot of people get it in their shoulders. So the players took a few minutes to kind of assess where they were feeling it in their body, and just the importance of being able to identify that and to let it go. And so one of her suggestions was to, at the beginning of every single class that they go to, when you sit down in your chair, do a scan and feel, okay, yep, I got some tension in my shoulders, and just release that, and just get your mind and body used to releasing that tension and relaxing. And I actually do that on airplanes. I hate flying, and so I get very tense and anxious internally when I'm on an airplane, and so I actually use that as a way to get better at softball. I think about, okay, would I be able to have an at-bat right now? Because oftentimes when you're playing in a big game, you have those exact same emotions, those same feelings, and so every single time I'm on an airplane, which is a lot, I work on my ability to just relax and to feel as though I have the body control, the relaxation to be able to step into the batter's box at that point. Distracts me from the fact that I'm not enjoying being in the tin can in the air. And she also talked a lot about posture with the team and just being mindful of that as well, kind of checking in every now and then throughout the day. And that's something else that you can do at the beginning of practice. You can actually have your players stand, feel the tension, feel the release, and if they maybe don't have any tension or are able to release it, then actually physically flexing your muscles and then relaxing them has a very similar effect. So that's something that you can go through your whole body and tense and release and just get the body and mind used to doing that. Goal setting is another thing. You can have players at the beginning of practice set a goal for that day or set a goal for that week or whatever it might be, just to have some productive focus. We have a little whiteboard on each of the players' lockers, and every single day they write a focus for the day, and we'll just pick someone out, one or two players out at the beginning of practice and say, "Hey Lauren, what's your focus today?" And they so far have been very good about it and being able to respond right away, having thought about it already, which is great. And just having a mental transition is always great, and that's what our herd is set to do. So we know that at the beginning of practice we're going to have 5 minutes before we jump into warming up or doing anything softball related that is going to transition from the busy day into practice. So you can also, if you want to throw something at the end of practice, take 10 minutes to do. One day we did mindful communication, and so that allowed our players to get to know each other a little bit better in a different way. And it was pretty challenging, so we just set it up where players were in pairs, and one player for 5 minutes was asking the other player, "Who are you? Who are you?" So there's a couple different things you can ask, and that's what we chose to do that day. And so they said, "Who are you?" And the player would say, "Joey." And the person would say, "Thank you. Who are you?" And so they'd have to come up with more and more and more answers. So a daughter, a sister, a softball player, an athlete, et cetera, until, for 5 minutes. So they had to get extremely creative with their answers, and they learned a lot about each other in that time, as well as worked on being extremely focused in their listening. So the player who was asking the question, they knew what their response was and they knew what their next question was going to be, so they didn't have to think about communication at all. So they literally just got to listen. And the other thing that we asked is, as the listener, you don't react. So there's no other questions, there's no follow-up questions, and there's no, "Oh, that's so cool," or, "Oh, that's kind of weird." So you literally just sit there and listen. And so I think it was challenging, but I think the players enjoyed kind of getting to know a little bit more, and it's just a different way to communicate with a teammate. You do reflections, and one thing that I think is really good for that time, the immediate after practice reflection, is of how your mind was during practice. So what were your thoughts? How did you perform, and how did your mind mirror that performance? A lot of times we'll walk away from the best practice we've had all year, and we won't think about how our mind was during that practice and how to set ourselves up for success in the future. Retooling of goals, another thing you can do at the end of practice, based on how things went that day. Visualization, so we talked about, if you had your 6 swings and maybe 3 of your swings were so good, they were your favorite swings you've ever taken, taking a few minutes to revisit those and keep them fresh in your mind. And then another thing that we have implemented this year, we have everybody's name in a bag, and players every now and then will pick a name out of the bag, and they will observe that player for a couple of days. And then at the end of a practice, a couple days later, they will approach that person and give them feedback on how they're, whatever it was that we set it up to be. So it could be their body language for those couple days, their work ethic, what they contributed to make our team better in those previous couple days, as well as feedback that is going to help that player improve. So, okay, I saw something that you were doing over the last couple days that isn't going to help us get better, and so I think that's something you could focus on improving. And we want to continue to promote feedback peer-to-peer, and not just, "Oh, you did a great job today, I really liked how hard you were swinging," but also I saw you kind of slack off on a couple reps, and I think it would make our team a lot better if you focus every single rep through practice. So constant reminders are extremely important, and we have added a few sayings in the locker room so that every single day when the players walk into the locker room, they're seeing those things, they're reading them day after day, and it's not just something that we have talked about and then never revisited. So I think so often there's a cool idea, we want to do it, and we talk to our players about it, and then we just think that it sticks and we don't kind of revisit it. And so something that's extremely important is making sure that they're seeing the messages every single day, and it's becoming more ingrained in them, whether they know it or not. The biggest key that I've found is to plan ahead. And I did my master's in coaching and athletic administration a few years back, and one of the tasks that we had to do for one of our classes was to plan an entire year out, practice by practice, what our focus was going to be each day, when we were going to designate time for the mental game, when we were going to focus on certain physical skills. And the thing that was loud and clear in that course, and as well as in reality, is that we always have something physical to get better at, and we always want to focus on that thing in practice. We always want to be able to work on the things that we can see, and so unless we schedule time to work on the mental game, it's likely not going to happen. So it's extremely important to plan ahead, plan specific days to focus on the mental game, plan your practice structure with 5 minutes at the beginning or 10 minutes at the end, or both, or ways to implement the mental game into practice. Otherwise, it's easy to forget. One of my high school teachers said this to me, and it has just stuck with me since that day. It's not what you have time for, it's what you choose to do. And because I think the mental game is so important, I choose to implement it into my program, into my daily practices. And it's, if it's something that is important to you and you are willing to make the time, then it's going to happen, it's going to benefit your players. And otherwise, it won't. But we have the power to choose what we want to do with our time, and so I encourage you to implement the mental game on a daily basis. Any questions? Yes?
One of the things you guys referenced was when you have two players who talk to each other, encourage them to give positive, then also negative feedback if it's necessary. How does that work in reality? Do players actually give each other comments such as, hey, you didn't work hard enough, perhaps, or that sort of thing? And how does that fit with, does that cause problems, or?
Well, we talk about the importance of it, and because it aligns with our goals and what we want to do as a team, it's looked at less so as mean as opposed to helping us work towards our end goal. So we do the exact same thing. I stole it from our mental performance coach with Team Canada. We do that, and I made myself a promise that I was going to give someone feedback every single day because I know how important it is, and my teammates didn't take it personally, and that was pretty cool to see. Now, most of them didn't make that promise to themselves, so there were definitely some people who went through the summer and probably didn't give anyone some more negative feedback, but the culture is still building in that, and I foresee a similar transition with the Bucknell softball team, where some players will do it from the get-go and be okay doing it, and others will feel uncomfortable, but see it happening and get more used to it and work into it.
Would it make sense to write it down maybe at first, and then I don't know, then have one, like a coach or somebody present it out, to kind of ease into it?
I think it's fantastic, and if you can actually accomplish that, I mean, that's amazing if you can accomplish that with all of your team. And I tried it working.
Yeah, and I think even writing it down for yourself before you go sit down and talk to the person, because I think it's really easy to think about, okay, I'm going to tell them this, and then you go sit down and you're like, okay, maybe I don't want to tell them that. But if you've written it down already before, that's a really good idea. Written it down before, then it's there, and more encouraging to share that.
one coach had told me that they would get in a circle and you had to kind of say criticism because the person beside, or what, if I was up, this person would say criticism and then this person would say something positive. So you kind of sprinkle it in there a little bit, but I'm not sure if they predetermined who they were going to talk to or they just called them on the spot or the order, but it was a way to kind of cushion a little bit of the negative.
Yeah, and one thing that I thought was really cool, and we're going to do this as well, is the coaches participated in some of it over the summer. And so I somehow drew our athletic trainer, our pitching coach, our head coach. So I had the wonderful job of telling all of those people things that I thought they could do better, which was extremely challenging, but it was also really cool that they had put themselves in that position and were willing to be vulnerable with us. And so that helped a lot, and I foresee once I get the coaching staff involved with the same thing that it'll be uncomfortable for my assistants, I'm sure, but I think that will help encourage the players to be more open about their feedback with each other. So I'm excited about that. It's definitely challenging. Yes, but we like to do challenging things. I think a lot of the stuff that we do, a lot of the mental game stuff that we do can be translated to life as well. So to explain to the players how that's going to benefit them down the road in the workplace, with their families, and everything like that. Most of what we do, we want to be able to translate to their lives after college. We only have them for 4 years, and then they're off adulting, and so we want them to be able to translate those skills, and we talk about that as well, that this is going to benefit you down the road. So when they understand how important it is and how it will benefit them, they're more willing to buy into it.
There's other team bonding stuff you do. You said the herd thing at the beginning. Is that where you kind of do, like, I don't think, when I say team bonding, I'm sure it's called other things, but like so players. I mean, obviously in the college senior, there's so many things probably that cause team bonding, but organized team bonding. But is there any other like neat activities that you do?
So we are actually going to Bucknell is a cabin 8 miles from campus. So we are going for a night with the team just to hang out and do some team bonding activities. And one of the things that we will do is, so you can start thinking about yours now, is everyone's going to share a story with the team that the team doesn't know about them. So something from their childhood or from an experience that the team wasn't a part of. And some of them I'm sure will get extremely deep and others might not, but I think that's another way to promote vulnerability. And I think I've talked about 5 dysfunctions of a team with you previously. So Google 5 dysfunctions of a team. There's a really good talk on YouTube. And one of the things that's talked about is vulnerability-based trust. So it's not, the best teams don't just trust that my teammate's going to back me up when I'm going back on a fly ball, but it's that I can be vulnerable with that player or that teammate. And so that's something that we'll work hard to continue building with our players. And so putting them in positions where they have the opportunity to open up and share something a little more deep and show their teammates that they're willing to be vulnerable. That'll help us build really strong bonds. I've been fortunate enough to inherit a team that's really good with regard to their team chemistry and team bonding, and they take care of all of that stuff on their own. But we want to get deeper, and so doing some of those activities where they'll be encouraged and forced to share something will help in that. We also we have a buddy system, so every player who comes in has a buddy for their first year, and then they'll get a new buddy for their second year, a new buddy for their third year, a new buddy for their fourth year. And last year, being my first year there, was the first time that the team had done it. And I just had dinner with one of our alums that graduated last spring a couple of days ago, and she's like, when you talked about the buddy system, I thought it was so stupid, and but it wasn't gonna make a difference. Our team's so close, and he's like, I text my buddy every day. And so she's not even on campus anymore, and she and her buddy from last season text every day. Sometimes it's just to check in, sometimes it's to send an encouraging note, and other times it's just to say hi. But she said that it did so much for her, even on a team that was really close and got along really well, just to have that one person that, will put them in situations where, okay, so today you gotta go get dinner with your buddy, or gotta over break, send your buddy a video, a motivational video, and just ways to kind of force them to bond, and then some of them it ends up being their lifeline for the season. Stole that from my college coach. Last questions.
Can I ask another question?
Yes.
And I don't want to give you command tons any more than you already have, quite frankly, but what you said I thought was pretty neat, and it's the opposite of what I've done. And again, we coach 12-year-old girls, so I have no familiarity with college age girls. The idea of, like, when we do a drill, particularly hitting, I would always feel bad to end on, like, my ass swing.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, all right, one more, And then you said that you don't do that. I thought it was kind of neat, and I just was curious how that worked for you. Again, understanding it's college versus 12 years old.
Yeah, it's frustrating for the players for sure, because they've grown up being able to take another rep, and always walk away feeling good about that one. And so when I first introduce it, it's kind of shocking, and the athletes don't necessarily like it, but again, expressing to them the importance of learning that skill to be able to walk away from an at-bat that didn't go well and approach your next one with the confidence that you need allows them to understand why it's happening, and then they get used to it. So, at first it's like, can I get another one? Like, no, you can't. And then, a couple weeks in, they don't even ask anymore. They just know it's the routine, it's what we do. Well, thank you.